Good morning, students. We are discussing about the Mughal Empire. We have seen the successive rulers starting from Babur, Humayun, Shah, Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. This was a very long period in medieval Indian history. A very powerful empire was built. The empire was not built exclusively on the political factors like the strength of army, a well-oiled official machinery, etc. But several other factors also went into the process of building empire. That is one of the reasons why there is always a debate with regard to Akbar in whether considering Akbar as a nation builder or not. From the times of Akbar down to the times of Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire had been a very powerful empire. Akbar and Aurangzeb were exceptionally powerful. Jahangir and Shah Jahan were also powerful. And such a kind of a powerful empire, which was compared to the Bourbons of France, eventually collapses after 1707. So today's class, we will just try to focus on why such a powerful empire collapses. What were the factors? What are the reasons? How far was Aurangzeb responsible? Or how far the later Mughals were responsible? So these are some of the points. Was there a crisis in the state? Was there a collapse in the administrative system? Or was it a process of disintegration of the socio-economic conditions? These are all some of the factors that have to be examined when we are trying to understand the downfall of the Mughal Empire. I will prefer the word disintegration because when I look at the Mughal Empire, I feel the downfall is a result of a continuous disintegration of the socio-economic conditions, which ultimately resulted in its political downfall. The Mughal Empire was not exclusively depending on, as I've been insisting on this particular point of view, it was not exclusively depending on the strength of military. It was depending on different forces, like the Rajputs were a force, the Jats were a force, the Satnamis were a force. Force here, I mean, both as a group, they were a political force. As agriculturalists, they were social force. The same thing cannot be said with regard to the Marathas, where the Marathas were more of a political force. But in the north, when you're trying to understand the Jats, Satnamis, especially the Jats and Satnamis, they were an agricultural force. They were also an agricultural force. So suddenly, from the times of Aurangzeb, after 5 or 10 years of reign of Aurangzeb, you feel that all these contributory forces getting disturbed, coming up with a dissent note against the Mughal Empire, developing provincial ambitions, which led to provincial revolts. So what went wrong? Aurangzeb was a powerful ruler. The point that I want you to understand and think is, what went wrong? Did things go wrong with the political system? Did things go wrong with the administrative structure? Is it because of a crisis that had developed in the Mansabdari system? Or is it a combination of all these factors? This is what has to be examined. So, in my opinion, when I'm trying to tell you, I personally feel that it was a process of socio-economic and political disintegration. The social factors fell apart. Suddenly, the economic conditions were not on a growth graph. They were either getting stagnated or in some cases they were on the decline. And politically, you have provincial ambitions emerging among the heterogeneous nobility that was there in the Mughal Empire during this particular period. Added to this, you have the invasions, the foreign invasions. So we will just try to see how these factors went into the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. I have just put it as 1707 because after that you have the political downfall, but the disintegration process takes on from the times of Aurangzeb or a little earlier than that also. So here in the beginning, at the outset, I'll just show you some of the photos connected to the Mughal Empire during the period of Aurangzeb and a little earlier and after the period of Aurangzeb. After going through these slides, we will go into what we call, or what we can say, the causes for the downfall or the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. The next slide, which I am showing you, is the Mansabdari system of the Mughals. You can see the king sitting in the center, and you can see different flags which are depicting the kind of region from which they came and the rank, file, etc. And the Mansabdars having their deliberations with the Mughal emperor. So the Mansabdari system was the backbone of the Mughal empire, the backbone of the Mughal administration. So if anything went wrong in the Mansabdari system, or if a crisis developed in the Mansabdari system, it was going to definitely affect the administrative structure. And when the administrative structure is affected, the political system will also be affected. A crisis can emerge in the Mansabdari system because the Mansabdars were performing both the civil and the military functions, and a portion of the army at a regional level was under their control. If two Mansabdars nourished any kind of a political ambition, they were capable, or they were in a position to revolt against the Mughal Empire. So it was very important to see that the Mansabdars were kept happy. They were loyal to the Mughal system. They followed the administrative procedures and they identified themselves with the Mughal Empire. This was very important. This was very important, and the factors that any kind of a crisis that can emerge in the Mansabdari system will ultimately affect the political system. The next slide that I am going to show you is the slide of a kind of officials in the Mughal Empire. And you can see that you have a singer, you have the emperor, you have, if you can just go and if you take a closer view of the, picture, you can see the administrative functions of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Emperor is seated and he is having his deliberations with the, I request you to take a closer look of the photograph. Here you have, again, I'm showing you the Mansabdari system, administrative system. This was introduced by Akbar, and the Mansab, word Mansab is of Arabic origin, meaning of a rank or a position. The system hence is determined the rank or the government official. So this was the backbone of the Mansabdari system and of the administrative system of the Mughal Empire. And you can see that the importance that the Mughals enjoyed, the Mansabdars enjoyed in the entire administrative process. Here I'm showing you a method of Rajput political system, which was because Rajputs had become an important force during the period of the Mughals, and you can see the way Rajputs had their deliberations. And so these were the important factors of Mughal administrative structure. So first, let us try to see how far Aurangzeb was responsible for the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire decline, it begins with the reign of Aurangzeb, whose policy was to a great, the kind of policies, whether it was the Deccan policy, whether it was the Rajput policy, whether it was the Hindu policy, or whether it was the religious policy, the policy that was followed by Aurangzeb was very important in reversing the very foundations on which the Mughal Empire was resting. As I was telling you in the beginning, the Mughal Empire was resting on certain political and non-political administrative functions. So the non-political administrative functions, when I am trying to say, was based on the social and academic philosophy. So Akbar had given a social and academic philosophy to the Mughal Empire, and Aurangzeb probably felt that his grandfather had done a mistake, and he was trying to change the political and social philosophy of the Mughal state itself, or probably he was trying to change the nature of the Mughal state. As a staunch Sunni Muslim, he believed that this region can be Islamized, and that particular change in the attitude of the ruler towards the state had brought about a basic change on the foundations, on the basic foundations on which the state was resting. So to some extent, we can say that Aurangzeb was responsible for bringing about a change in the social and academic philosophy of, or the nature of the state, Mughal state, which ultimately becomes one of the major causes for the socio-economic disintegration during the times of Aurangzeb. So as soon as Aurangzeb died, the decline showed itself. So there was a political decline, which you can say were the later Mughals were responsible. And you have internally, when you're trying to look at it, you have a socio-economic disintegration. So it's a combination. When you're trying to understand the downfall of the Mughal Empire, it is a combination of a socio-economic disintegration and a political downfall. The political downfall, we can say the later Mughals were responsible, but for the socio-economic disintegration, we can say that Aurangzeb to a great extent was responsible. So we will just see one or two of his political policies. The Deccan policy. The Deccan policy was a wrong strategy that was taken up by Akbar because he stayed there for a period of almost 25 years, a long period, and he was not in Delhi. So basically with the idea of bringing Bijapur and Golconda under his control. These were the Muslim states, and these states had always been at war with Marathas. We had seen that. So, just with an idea of making politically an integral part of the Mughal Empire, Aurangzeb campaigns himself in the Deccan for more than a period of 20 years. So this was going to have a telling impact on the political fortunes of Delhi. Similarly, when you try to look at his Rajput policy, even the Rajput policy, Rajputs played a very important role, especially in the fields of defense and finance. These were the regions itself where the Rajputs had some kind of an expertise. And the Rajput policy, the religious policy that was followed by Aurangzeb, wherein he felt that it can be Islamized, the imposition of jizya tax, etc. And he allowed religious to override statesmanship. So religion was given a precedence over statesmanship. And this is very clearly explained by historian Ishwari Prasad in his book. So his great object was to make the land a land of Sunni Orthodox Islam. And he was taken away by this idea so strongly that he was even not able to tolerate the Sunni fold or the Sunni sects of the Islamic fold. And so this was one factor where the idea of building up an Islamic state went down to the minds and hearts of the people, which was resented by the Hindus. On the social front and on the political front, it antagonized forces like the Rajputs, the Marathas, the Jats, the Satanis, the Sikhs, etc. So his religious policy had become a cause for a kind of a social discontentment combined with political, political differences with the Mughal Empire. So Deccan policy was a policy which was a political blunder, and on the social front, when you're trying to look at it, the academic, social and academic front, the religious policy was a blunder, where the idea that the land can be Islamized and that it should be made or turned into a Sunni land was a very wrong calculation on the part of Aurangzeb. One ruler in the earlier times was where they considered that imposition of jizya tax and other forms of taxes, especially on Hindus, was Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji was considering the Hindu population as Qarzguzars or taxpayers. You can find a revival of that kind of a similar idea during the time of Aurangzeb, where he felt that the Hindu population, his religious policy, gives us an idea or an impression that they should play an important role when it comes to the tax paying, but when it comes to the service, they should be sidelined. The reason is because of the fact that he believed that the land should be turned into a Sunni Orthodox land. So the religious policy becomes a very important ruler. The religious policy becomes a very important policy which reverses the basic idea of what a Mughal state was from the times of Akbar down to the times of Aurangzeb. The Sikhs and the Marathas were bitterly against him because of all this. Mainly the Sikhs and the Marathas, they were against him on the political front, and the Satanis, Jats and other forces, they were on the agrarian front. Similarly, the Shias were also against this idea of the Sunni domination, and all this was leading towards party politics based on certain group formations, politics in the Mughal court, which was not going to be in the good interest of the Mughal state. While all this was a kind of a socio-economic political atmosphere that was prevailing in the Mughal court, the personal traits the personal traits of Aurangzeb also played an important role. Aurangzeb by nature was a very suspicious man. He was a very suspicious man and carried on the whole work of the government all by himself. He did not believe his ministers, or there was no one. He felt that there was no one loyal to him. So he tried to carry on the entire administration all by himself. And there is a limitation for human energy. Aurangzeb might be a great ruler, a great conqueror, whatever his greatness in the fields of conquering and abilities as the administrator were, but there was limitations for human abilities which he failed to recognize or which he failed to understand. As a result of which, he did not have anyone who was loyal to him, and basically this was because of his suspicious nature. He did not trust his generals, he did not trust his nobles, and he did not even trust his sons. The best and the worst part of it was that he did not even trust his sons. The result was that one of his sons received no training. None of his sons they did not receive any kind of a training or experience in the art of government. See, when you come down to, from the times of Akbar, Jahangir was appointed as a governor, Shah Jahan was appointed as a governor, and Aurangzeb himself was appointed as a governor, and that gave them some kind of a training in terms of the needed administrative understanding of the state, operations, military operations, expeditions, etc. But the same thing did not happen in connection with the sons of Aurangzeb, where you don't find any of their sons getting any kind of a training during his time. So the question emerged during the time of Aurangzeb itself: what next after Aurangzeb? When the sons are not trained, what next after Aurangzeb? This became a very important factor. And added to this, you have the weak successors. So when you don't have any kind of a training, when you don't have any kind of a proper, understanding of what a state is and what goes into the art of making administrative requirements, then you will not be trained in the statesmanship or the statescraft. That's what happened for the later Mughals or the sons of Aurangzeb. Okay. So when this kind of a political uncertainty or kind of a political instability, this information reaches regions like Central Asia, you have ambitions emerging in Central Asia also. So that resulted in the foreign invasions. Okay, we will discuss that. But so the sons were not given any kind of a training, and the administrative structure was a vast structure. The reason is because of the fact that the Mughal rulers were absolute rulers. There were limitations to individual abilities. Aurangzeb did not realize this, did not train his sons in proper administrative system, or did not give them any kind of a governorship of any particular region. And you have a vast empire right from down to, from Kandar provinces down to touching the shores of Kerala. So such a kind of a vast administrative, vast empire needed a group of people or some administrative officials on whom he could rest his trust upon. That did not take place. So this absolutism minus supporting administrative structure or system proved very fatal for the Mughal Empire. Apart from that, if you just try to see the Islamic theory of kingship, there was no law of succession. The Islamic theory of kingship does not elucidate any kind of a law of succession. It almost literally says that any of the son, or if not the son, anyone who was powerful can succeed to the throne. So, unlike this Hindu theory of kingship, where the eldest son had the right to sit on the throne, the Islamic theory of kingship does not speak of any theories of kingship, where the throne was open. Anyone could sit on the throne of Delhi. So it led to fratricidal wars among the kith and kin of the Mughal emperor. So no law of succession. We have seen that in the case of Aurangzeb himself, where Dara, Shah Shuja, Murad and Aurangzeb went to war, killed one another, and ultimately Aurangzeb sits on the throne of Delhi. So this leads to some kind of an ambiguity after the demise of a ruler. That's what has happened in the case of the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb had not given any training to his sons, and as a result of which the later Mughals were very weak, and this contributed to the downfall of Mughal Empire. So we can say that to a very great extent, Aurangzeb was to some extent responsible for the downfall and the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. There was other factors also, like the Mughal Empire very strongly depended on its nobility. And the nobility, which you call the Mansabdars, Aurangzeb was not able to enjoy the nobility of this group of officials on whom the administrative structure of the Mughal was depending. So this was a very, very crucial stage. The period of Aurangzeb was a very crucial stage. So you have weakness coming into the political system, you have weakness emerging in the social system, you have some kind of a crisis coming into the academic system. Finally, you can also see that there was a kind of a weakness that was coming into the army. Immense wealth, hot climate and luxury made the Mughal army ease-loving and weak. The officers went to the battlefield in palanquins. This was, something which was very unusual. And the soldiers were taking on to the women folk with them, which was not acceptable when you're going for a war. The bravery and the heroism of the Mughal army, which was there during the time of Akbar, was on the decline. So when all these factors, see, it was very strong during the time of Akbar, during the time of Jahangir it was strong, during the time of Shah Jahan it was strong, even for the first 10 years it was a very strong army under Aurangzeb. But suddenly the weakness is coming into the Mughal army. Added to this, you have factions in the court. During the time of the later Mughals, or from the times of later Mughals, the Muslim nobles, the Muslim nobles were divided into two groups or two parties. One was the Turani and the other one was the Irani. So you have the Rajputs, you have the Mansabdars, you have the Muslim nobility being divided on racial grounds like the Turani and the Irani. The Turani party consisted of nobles who came from Central Asia, and they were mostly Sunnis. The Turanis, they were from Central Asia and mostly Sunnis. Okay, and the Iranis were nobles who came from Persia. Okay, so this was the basic point of conflict. So you have a conflict coming between the Shias and Sunnis. You have a conflict coming amongst Rajputs. You have the Jats revolting. You have the Satnamis revolting. So suddenly you have divisive forces. Forces which were going against the Mughal administrative system. Forces which were going against the Mughal social system. Forces which were going against the Mughal political system, all start emerging during the time of Aurangzeb. Sorry. So, what was the situation towards the later reign period of Aurangzeb? You have different groups, and these groups were warring with each other. And this kind of hostility among the groups that have emerged in the Mughal court weakened the Mughal rule. How Mughal rule becomes weak is because of this. So after the death of Aurangzeb, there was no capable ruler who could ascend the throne, take the political, administrative, social, and economic conditions into control, and take the provincial governors into control, get their loyalty, and carry on with the administrative system. As a result of which, you have regional or provincial leaders proclaiming their regional independence. You have suddenly a provincial ambitions coming up among the people, especially in provinces like Bengal. You find Alivardi Khan coming up. You have Sadat Khan in Awadh, Nizamul Mulk Asaf in Deccan, the Rohillas in Rohilkhand, the Jats near Agra. They literally declared their independence. So suddenly you find the Mughal Empire falling apart. This, we can say, is a political falling apart. The point that I am trying to stress here, or the point that I am trying to make clear is that a kind of a socio-economic disintegration precedes this political downfall. The political downfall is a result of two factors. One, the provincial ambition of the provincial leaders. Two, the foreign invasions. But preceding this, my argument, or the point that I'm trying to impress upon you, is that there was a kind of a socio-economic disintegration. So you have provincial kingdoms coming up like the Jats in Agra, the Rohilkhand, the Rohillas, Nizam in Deccan, and Bengal. You also have some kind of Alivardi Khan coming up. So internally, there was a crisis, political crisis. So this had weakened, and this becomes the primary cause for the foreign invasions. Taking advantage of this kind of a political crisis that was prevailing, you have people like invaders like Nadir Shah taking advantage of this. In 1739, he invades the Mughal regions and annexes the entire Mughal regions between Trans-Indus and Afghanistan. He took away immense wealth with him, and leaving the Mughal Empire weak and exhausted. The Mughal Empire was weak and exhausted from 1707 onwards. After the death of Aurangzeb itself, the Mughal Empire became weak. But the invasions, like Nadir, invasions of people like Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali, completely weakened the Mughal Empire, and the Mughal Empire completely collapses after the after the death of Aurangzeb and during the time of the later Mughals. The empire itself was very unwieldy, and you don't have a sea power. So all these factors, the rise of regional powers, lack of sea power, foreign invasions, unwieldy empire, all these factors go into the downfall or the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. I am showing you a photograph of the later Mughals. I think so. This is a Bahadur Shah Zafar, which I have been able to collect, but he is definitely a member of the later Mughals. And here I have a portrait of Ahmad Shah Abdali. Ahmad Shah Abdali and Nadir Shah. These were the two great invaders who ransacked the Mughal Empire. And then finally, Delhi's position was reduced to this, where you have the later Mughals trying to rule Delhi and its suburbs with a group of men who were close to the royal family. And this is one photograph which I am showing you of the ruins of some of the forts that were captured or invaded during the time of Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali. So, such a powerful empire, okay, which was built meticulously on a kind of a social philosophy, which gives us an idea of Mughal state, which turned the state into a benevolent state, which was compared as a golden age, ultimately has its downfall. So, when we are trying to understand the downfall of Mughal empire, let us not just look at it as a political downfall. If it was a political downfall, they should have been leave the invasions of Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali. There should have been a great war, and the Mughal rulers must have lost the war. Then we could have said that it was a political downfall. But when we are trying to understand the causes or the factors which led to the disintegration of the Mughal empire, we can definitely say that it was not just the political factors, it was a combination of political, socio, and economic factors which led to the disintegration of the Mughal empire, and reversal of policies and a crisis that emerged in the Mansabdari system ultimately leads to, all these factors ultimately lead to the downfall of the Mughal empire. We will continue with another topic in the next class.